Municipal Watch, bringing your local issues on the national agenda. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
Well, for Municipal Watch today, we're looking at the issue of unused grants that municipalities often send back to National Treasury for whatever reasons that they may put on the table. When we look at the previous financial year, 12.8 billion rand of these grants were spent, and this is of a total of 44.1 billion rand worth of conditional grants that were allocated to municipalities. Now, conditional grants are funds that are allocated by the national government to municipalities to cover services including infrastructure development, housing, and public transport upgrades. According to Section 21 of the Division of Revenue Act, any conditional allocation or portion not spent by the end of the financial year must go back to the National Revenue Fund. And often then what happens is that the allocation for the upcoming financial year will then be reduced in line with the expenditure of the previous year. So why are municipalities sending money back to Treasury when there are clearly so many things that this money can be used towards? Mielani Holeni is Chief Group Advisor at Ndiso Consulting Group. Mielani, good morning.
Good morning, Kathy, and good morning to the listeners.
Dikeledi Direko is a member of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on COGTA. Good morning, Dikeledi.
Good morning, Kathy, and good morning to the listeners at home.
Zinzi Mpatlele is a manager, budget and reporting. It says Polokwane municipality, but do we have a Polokwane municipality? Or is it the Capricorn? It's a Capricorn district. Zinzi, good morning.
Good morning, Kathy, and good morning to all the listeners tuning in this morning. It's a pleasure to join you. We have Polokwane municipality and we have Capricorn district as well.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for that clarity. Well, let's start off then just with understanding these conditional grants, Mielani, and what the purpose behind these grants has always been.
Yeah, so I think, grants, as you would put it, are appropriations that come from the fiscus, which is coming through the Division of Revenue Act, which are then allocated to municipalities and can be allocated to other organs of state as well. But specifically, we're talking about municipalities. And as the word suggests, it's conditional. So there are certain conditions that must be met for the funds to be firstly released, and secondly, how those funds are going to be spent. And they are normally tied to a particular grant, which is to address, various things. It could be a USDG, for instance, which is, the Urban Sustainable Development Grant. It could be your MIGs. It could be grants that the National Treasury have fashioned and created so that they can use them as transfer mechanisms, which is the funding mechanism of various municipalities. So grants are important because they support the equitable share in a way that, the equitable share may be used mainly for the operational issues and to close whatever gaps that may be there, whether it be through the indigents, the free basic services, and various other items which are operational in nature. And grants, may tend to be more capex in nature, and even though you also have grants which are also cover the OPEX of certain items. So grants are just a funding mechanism which National Treasury makes funding available to municipalities in the greater scheme of the Division of Revenue Act.
What is the process, Mielani, in as far as the criteria used for the allocation of these grants? We know that municipalities aren't necessarily getting the same amount of money, particularly to do the same thing. So how is that allocated from National Treasury? And when it comes to these funds, are they particularly ring-fenced towards the delivery of certain services?
So the Divisional of Revenue Act is, if I may put it, the manual behind how funds are allocated to municipalities. Equitable share with its own formula, but a similar extension, or at least an extension of the same formula that may be applied for equitable share, can also be used or is used for determining the grants that go into those municipalities. But to take you back in terms of that particular formula, it considers the population of a municipality, considers the economic circumstances within that municipality, whether there is industry. So a large part of it, as you would have heard, is driven by what the statistics coming from the census, which is from Statistics South Africa, how they then characterize each one of the regions or the districts and the municipalities, whether there's a growth in population, there's a decline in population. But grants as well also look at, the backlogs of various infrastructure that must be laid down, and it looks at the service delivery in terms of how they can accelerate the service delivery within various municipalities. And those municipalities that typically don't have industry tend to be given slightly more in terms of what the allocations would be from an equitable share, as well as from the conditional grants that are given. And so those conditional grants, again, I go back to the word conditional. It then suggests that they must be ring-fenced for the purpose that they are meant for, and not for any other purpose. So in other words, you shouldn't pay salaries using a conditional grant. You shouldn't go and implement, whatever infrastructure which is not part of the conditions which are covered by that particular grant. So they are supposed to be ring-fenced so that they are channeled into the areas where they are supposed to be. Hence the reporting that is done on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, to show what the progress is with regards to the expenditure of those grants towards achieving the goals which the municipalities promised, or at least have laid down to National Treasury that they are going to be fulfilling.
Dikeledi, it sounds pretty clear-cut in as far as the intention behind these grants and why it is that they exist in the first place. So why are we seeing that only half of these allocations are being spent, and what does it tell us about what is happening at a local government level?
Thank you, Kathy. This grant, as Mr. Yelani has just indicated, these grants are governed by strict conditions and deadlines, and underspending of or mismanagement of these funds limits the service delivery and has a broader implications for governance and public trust. What we've observed as a portfolio committee as the challenges to resulting to underspending of these funds and mismanagement are as follows. The first one is an issue of capacity and constraints. Many municipalities lack skilled personnel, and what we also observe is that municipal budget is structured in a way that larger percentage of budget comes from the revenue collection of that particular municipality, and the smaller percentage comes from the grants. So if municipalities are unable to collect revenue, they end up tapping into these grants that are conditional, and they then use that money for the operational costs. And if they were, and when they are supposed to account for those grants that they have used, they are unable to account to. And if you are unable to account on the money that you have just received, you are unable to get another tranche of the money. And what also is a challenge is that governance and political instability in the municipalities, where there are political interference in the processes of the municipality. We also have poor project planning and preparations. Grant funds are often submitted without proper feasibility studies, technical designs and costs, and all those things that are needed for compliance of that money. We also have issues of corruption and procurement inefficiencies, whereby the process of procurement are tampered with or are delayed and ended up the money going back to the National Treasury. And what is also important is we also experience weak oversight and accountability. Remember that the council has a mandate to ensure that they run the municipality as per the roles and responsibilities of each and every stakeholder within the municipality. So if there's no proper accountability and oversight, it means that there's a weak audit control, ineffective municipal public accounts committee, which reduce transparency and follow up on the project. So those are the weaknesses that we also observed. And as a result of that, we end up having consequences of underspending, which is also delays in service delivery for essential services such as your water, sanitation, and electricity. We also observe whereby the allocation of the money will then be taken from the municipalities to try to deprive that particular community with the services that they were supposed to do. And if that money is taken back, it simply means that some of the projects of the infrastructure will not be able to be completed. And as a result of that, they will also reduce the economic activities in that particular municipality, because if your infrastructure is not correct, is not right, then people will not also invest in that particular municipality. However, as a result of that, because it's something that we have observed for a very long period, we then had engagement with the Department of Copter and Treasury on a remedial solution to this particular challenge, whereby we then agreed that National Copter will need to strengthen municipality in terms of the technical and managerial support. They also need to utilize their implementing agency, which is the Municipal Infrastructure Support Agency. And in case when municipality is failing to spend the money or they are misusing the municipality, then the National Copter must introduce Schedule 16, whereby they will then have to implement those projects on behalf of the municipality.
When one thinks about these allocations, Dikeledi, there would obviously be a certain level of wisdom from the Treasury looking at the state of affairs in a particular municipality and then seeing just what kind of money it can be contributing towards certain aspects, whether it's infrastructure, as was mentioned, or housing delivery. So this issue of capacity, it's a big concern, because at the point that Treasury allocates this money, is there a sense that the municipalities would be well equipped to spend it? Why are we seeing the capacity challenges that are there to the extent that we are?
Yeah, the problem of capacity is that you sometimes wonder what is it? Is it maybe the issue of capacity or lack of willingness for people to do what they are getting paid for? Because when you look at the organogram of municipalities, you'll then realize that in other municipalities, they are well established in terms of their different departments where they have skilled people, while on others there are those that does not have skilled people. But even on those ones that have skilled people, they are unable to deliver. So hence I'm saying it's because of different challenges that we have in the municipality. In other municipalities, you'll realize that the problem is not necessarily capacity, but the problem is political interference or it's corruption. In other municipalities, as you indicated, there's a challenge of capacity building. That is why we are encouraging our municipality that they must now start to perform job evaluation and skills audit in their municipality, because we'll realize that in a finance department, instead of having people who understand finance, you have someone who's got a teaching, of which is not relevant to that particular department. You go to the infrastructure department, people with relevant skills are not there, but you have human resource. So that's one of the things that we also observed in the municipality, that there's a skills mismatch. That is why now we also have the National School of Government that is going to partnership with our institutions so that they can also assist in capacity building and professionalization. And we'll also have to improve our monitoring and evaluation, whereby the Treasury must get annual quarterly report for municipalities in order to monitor the progress in terms of the spending of the municipalities.
Okay, we're going to continue the conversation in a moment.
Hashtag SAFM Talking Point. Municipal Watch, bringing your local issues on the national agenda. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
We continue the conversation on the talking point. We're focusing then this morning on municipal grants. These are the conditional grants that are issued to municipalities for delivery of certain services. Looking at the previous financial year, 44.1 billion rand was the amount of money allocated towards conditional grants. Only 12.8 billion rand of that was spent. The rest of it went back to National Treasury. Why is it that we're seeing this phenomena? Melanie Holeni is Chief Group Advisor at Indiso Consulting, Dikeledi Direko, Member of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on COCTA, and Zinzi Mpahlele is a Manager, Budget and Reporting at the Polokwane Municipality. Zinzi, let me give you a chance then to also weigh in on this conversation, and because you manage some of these processes within a municipality, you can speak about just what some of the challenges might be that municipalities face with spending these allocations.
Thank you so much, Kathy. So we have a combination of reasons, structural, operational, and human reasons. We have poor project planning and readiness, as the lady has already mentioned, whereby you find that many projects are not shovel-ready when the budget is approved, and this includes the designs, the approved business plans, the environmental land use approvals. And without these, the funds can't be legally spent, even if they are available. We have delayed procurement processes where supply chain management delays slows everything down. Tenders take months to advertise, evaluate, and award. And bid committees do not meet regularly, and by the time the service providers are appointed, it's too late to spend within the financial year. Then we also have capacity constraints, as the lady has already mentioned as well, where we lack technical staff like your engineers, project managers, and planners, and the finance team might not necessarily be trained adequately to monitor the capital project or to project cash flows adequately. Sometimes find that the budget exists, but the execution capability is missing. Then in terms of the politics changing the priorities as well, you find that projects might be reprioritized mid-year due to a political shift. And then, of course, comes SCM deviations that will stall the progress as well. We have a gap between the political promises and the practical readiness. And then we also have community disruptions and service delivery protests where websites are often disrupted by community protests or business forums. And these delays, they push projects beyond the financial year, causing under expenditure. And in some instances, you find that there's lack of integration between departments, the engineering, planning, finance, and supply chain management teams not necessarily working in sync. And then for capital projects to succeed, we know that these teams must collaborate continuously, and many municipalities are still working in silos. So in short, the grant was there, but the system was not ready. Capital and conditional grant spending requires not just money, it requires systems, skills, speed, and synergies. So without those, even well-funded projects will fail to take off or finish on time. Thank you very much, Kathy.
I'm just thinking about the process, Zinzi, that goes into planning for projects in municipalities. Of course, by now, municipalities have come to expect conditional grants, right? Even where there has been underspending, more often than not, they're likely to still get some form of allocation. When does the planning for it begin? Because I would assume that the planning is something that is ongoing, that has more of a long-term view than waiting to see what the allocation is going to be during any given financial year, and then begin sort of deciding what it is that can or should be done with those monies.
Okay. So, Kathy, the planning begins in August, according to the municipal process plan. And then what you'll also see is that the Division of Revenue Bill allocates the funding over 3 years. So even the budgets that are approved as we speak, the projects are multi-year. However, we still have all these bottlenecks, regardless of the system allowing us to plan for a multi-year project. However, we are still not winning because of the limitations that I've just mentioned now. So the system allows us to plan forward. However, we do still experience such challenges. Thanks.
Mielani, what needs to be done? Because again, it's very much a wasted opportunity, because if we look at what the repercussions of this happening year on year, it means that a lot is lost out on in as far as service delivery, simply because municipalities are unable to spend the money.
So very practically, I think from the responses that were given by fellow panelists, as well as Dikeleni, the issues of capacity need to be addressed, very, very urgently. Capacity means that the vacancies that are supposed to be filled are filled on time and are filled with skilled people, as opposed to having acting positions upon acting. Because what acting does is it weakens the institutional structure, where someone would have to leave the job that they are doing to go and perform another job, which someone else would have to do the same. So it shifts the attention of the institution. So very practically is the filling of vacancies, but maybe even before that is to relook at the structure to understand how that organizational structure is geared towards facilitating the planning aspect, towards the implementation aspect, and also supporting the procurement of those services and the monitoring or project management thereof. Secondly, the establishment of project management units within municipalities are crucial, because they are supposed to be looking at how the expenditure or even the planning of projects, the packaging of projects well in advance, such that when the project or the funding is remitted to the municipalities, those projects are ready, the procurement has already been undertaken. So there also needs to be a strengthening of the project management unit within municipalities, so that they can also be able to think ahead, a year or two ahead. And this is how it can also be achieved, because if you look at the MTREF is a 3-year horizon in which the budget has been projected. So there are no surprises as to what's going to happen year 1, year 2, and year 3. So there needs to be actually a long-range planning which looks into how the MTREF has been crafted, as well as to look at the need through the IDP and have a master plan that plans ahead of time, so that there is no jitters when it comes to the implementation of projects where funds are lost. And that is how, at least, that can be achieved. Where perhaps there is a lack of capacity, municipalities are and should be able to look at, external support. The issues of MISA have been mentioned, or the institution of MISA has been mentioned, and many other state organs that have the implementation capacity as well as capability, as well as looking after as well at the private sector to augment that capacity. Because the bigger thing here is that if you have not planned for the expenditure and packaged the projects are not going to be sent out into the market for bidders to respond to them. So planning actually turns out to be a most crucial function, because that's where the project can be packaged. And perhaps, that is something that can be sourced temporarily, so that the planning and the master plans are in place, and then the implementation can take place. So those are literally 3 options, or at least in combination, that those options can be implemented to improve the expenditure and the service delivery, in essence, of those grants. Because it's not just expenditure, but it's the impact on the ground.
We're going to continue with this conversation shortly.
Municipal Watch, bringing your local issues on the national agenda. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
All right, we continue the conversation on the talking point. You heard then the statement on behalf of the political parties in as far as the decision to reverse VAT is concerned. We'll have more coverage of that in the 11 o'clock hour. For now, we're going to continue with Municipal Watch. I've got a few voice notes here that are speaking to this issue of capacity at municipalities and the level of skills that are resulting in municipalities being unable to spend money.
Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Kathy, it's quite unpalatable that municipalities can allow money to go back to Treasury when there are such heaps and heaps of challenges confronting communities. For instance, here in Mangaung, there is no street without pothole. Rubbish is all over. The graves are impassable. Water leakages are out of this world. And potholes are the order of the day. This is because we have councillors and officials of the municipality who do not have the interest of the communities they claim to be governing at heart. It is absolutely unacceptable that we find ourselves victims of such people who have lost touch with the ground, with the people on the ground. Mpho Bloom.
Good morning, Kathy. I'm a bit confused. Your guest says they don't have skilled people. So who do they then hire for positions of CFO and municipal manager? Do they just take anybody just so that they fill the post? I don't understand what she means or what the implications of that statement are. Who do they then place in those crucial positions like the CFO and the municipal manager? They just take anybody? Comrade that they know from somewhere, even if they don't have the skills. I don't understand. And why would that be the case?
Yeah, thanks for those voice notes. Look, Dabo, it sounds to me that the problem goes beyond just the positions of municipal managers, CFOs. As you can hear, there's a need for other highly specialized individuals within municipalities, and often they just don't have that. But Dikeledi, let me come to you. The point made by one of our listeners that this is really a situation that shouldn't be happening. That this is something that is actually deplorable, the fact that it's happening.
Yes, Kathy. On the issue of the capacity constraint, what I meant is that in the municipality, you've got different departments. And other municipalities will realize that instead of them prioritizing the finance and the infrastructure department, they will then decide to prioritize community services instead of this one. Then when you go to this department of infrastructure, you realize that there's a lot of vacancies that are not filled. Or in other municipalities, you realize that there are people who are employed, but there's a skills mismatch. Like in infrastructure, you get people who've got qualifications in management. And in that particular department, you need your engineers, your project managers. And the other challenge in that particular municipality is that the people who are highly qualified on the scarce skills doesn't want to work for government because of the salary scale, which is not comparable to the private sector. That's what I meant in terms of capacity constraints. And when you don't have a full complement of staff in your department in the municipality, it simply means that your planning is going to suffer. Because you'll have a plan, and then you need people who will also be overseeing the project. So if you don't have engineers, but you have those ones who finance, who have procured and were able to get tenders, advertise, and appoint tenders for that particular project. But if you don't have those who are going to oversee that particular project, it simply means that you are also going to fail as the municipality.
Zinzi, when you look at what it's going to take to turn things around, to change the situation, we heard the ideas that Mielani shared Are these practical? Are these things that municipalities can do?
Yes, Kathy, these are all things that it's possible to do within a municipality. But we also have to face that one of the biggest underlying problems that we face is the fact that we have a 5-year political cycle where you find that the leadership is not thinking beyond, like the long-term development horizon. And then that is why we are pushing for quick win projects, and then each new council, they change plans and then they start over. So these are normally the main basis for the delay. We do have, like for example, our CFO is a chartered accountant. We have about 4 chartered accountants in the municipality. All our Section 721 directors meet the minimum competencies. However, we also need to look at the disruption of continuity because of the leadership changes as well. So we have willing officials, but then the term of office as well plays a huge part. Thanks.
All right. Zinzimpatlele, let me thank you for your time. We're completely out of time for that conversation.